Hello and welcome to the Minimum Competence episode for Thursday, January 9th, 2025. I'm your host for today, Andrew Leahy, a tax and technology attorney from New Jersey. On today's episode, we cover the DOJ withholding parts of Jack Smith's Trump report, Trump's Supreme Court appeal in his hush money case, a tech law firm merger, and taxing oil wells. Let's remember, in the immortal words of Richard Nixon, the press is the enemy, the establishment is the enemy, the professors are the enemy. And read today's legal news. Appropriately, on this day in legal history, January 9th, 1913, Richard Milhous Nixon was born in Yorba Linda, California, a man destined to leave a complicated and indelible mark on American history. Nixon is perhaps most paradoxical of all U.S. presidents. On one hand, he created the Environmental Protection Agency, championed detente with the Soviet Union, and opened diplomatic relations with China. On the other hand, the man also gave us Watergate, wiretapping, enemies lists, and enough shady political machinations to keep conspiracy theorists busy for decades. Nixon's greatest hits of questionable decisions include the secret bombing of Cambodia, illegally expanding the Vietnam War while publicly claiming to wind it down, and the sabotage of peace talks to ensure his election in 1968. Let's not forget also his role in orchestrating the war on drugs, a policy whose consequences are still felt today, particularly in communities of color. And of course, he made liberal use of plausible deniability, whether it was about spying on political opponents or using government resources for personal vendettas. While Nixon may have soothed the environment by founding the EPA, he simultaneously polluted the political landscape, cementing cynicism in American politics for a generation. If you're struggling to reconcile his good deeds with his transgressions, don't worry, you're not alone. Historians, politicians, and everyday Americans have been wrestling with the Nixon conundrum for decades. Was he a political genius or a paranoid megalomaniac? Probably both, in addition to being a raging narcissist and, by all accounts, a deeply unpleasant man. His favorite breakfast? Cottage cheese with ketchup or black pepper if he was feeling spicy. On this day in legal history, we remember Richard Nixon, a man. He would have been 112 had a blood clot not cut him down as he prepared dinner in his Park Ridge, New Jersey home in 1994. The U.S. Justice Department announced it will not publicly release Special Counsel Jack Smith's full report on Donald Trump's handling of classified records, citing ongoing prosecutions against two Trump associates, Waltine Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira. While the report section addressing Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election will be made public, the documents-related portion will remain accessible only to specific members of Congress responsible for oversight. Attorney General Merrick Garland confirmed that Smith completed a 2-volume report on Trump, with the Justice Department stating that limited disclosure would balance public interest with protecting the legal rights of Nauta and de Oliveira. U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon temporarily blocked the release of the report upon a request by the two defendants. Previously, Trump was charged with illegally retaining classified records and obstructing government efforts to retrieve them, as well as attempting to interfere with the certification of President Joe Biden's election victory. However, the department dismissed these charges after Trump's November election, adhering to its policy against prosecuting a sitting president. Despite these dismissals, prosecutors are seeking to revive the obstruction case against Nauta and de Oliveira, who have pleaded not guilty. The Justice Department emphasized that its actions comply with federal regulations requiring a final report from special counsel investigations. President-elect Donald Trump has petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to halt his sentencing in a New York criminal case involving hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. In a filing made public on Wednesday, his lawyers argued that further proceedings in the Manhattan State Court would harm the presidency and federal government operations, citing presidential immunity. The New York Appeals Court recently rejected Trump's effort to delay sentencing, scheduled for Friday. His legal team has requested similar emergency relief from both the Supreme Court and New York's highest court. The Supreme Court has asked prosecutors to respond by Thursday, suggesting a swift decision is likely. Trump was convicted of falsifying business records to conceal a $130,000 payment by his former attorney Michael Cohen to Daniels before the 2016 election. He denies any wrongdoing or the alleged encounter with Daniels. His sentencing judge indicated Trump would likely face an unconditional discharge, leaving a judgment of guilt on record but imposing no jail time, fines, or probation. Trump's lawyers contend the case violates principles of presidential immunity established by a Supreme Court ruling granting former presidents broad protection from prosecution for official acts. They argue this immunity applies during the transitional period between his election and inauguration. Manhattan prosecutors have vowed to respond to Trump's request, marking the latest development in a historic case that has made Trump the first U.S. president to be criminally convicted. Zwilgen, a law firm specializing in technology and privacy law, has expanded into artificial intelligence with the acquisition of Luminous.law, a Washington, D.C.-based firm focused on AI and analytics risk. The merger adds 6 attorneys and data scientists to Zwilgen's team, enabling the firm to offer services in AI bias and cybersecurity testing, which are increasingly in demand amid regulatory scrutiny. Zwilgen, founded in 2010, now employs over 45 attorneys across offices in Washington, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco, with a total headcount of about 125, including subsidiaries specializing in subpoenas and gaming licensing. Its high-profile clients include Airbnb, Bose, DoorDash, NBC Universal, and the New York Times. Luminous.law, established 5 years ago, spun off a separate software company, Luminous.ai, in 2024 to offer custom AI risk management software on an enterprise platform. While Luminous.ai remains independent, Andrew Burt, co-founder of Luminous.law, will focus on the software company while serving as a legal advisor to Zwiljan's new AI unit. This deal is part of a broader trend of law firm mergers in 2025, particularly among small firms, as demand for legal expertise in emerging technologies grows. And finally, in my latest piece for Forbes, I talk about taxing oil wells. The United States is grappling with a crisis of orphaned and uncapped oil wells. Those are sites with no accountable owner and no proper closure. These wells pose significant environmental and public health risks, leaking methane, a potent greenhouse gas, and contaminating groundwater. Estimates suggest there are between 310,000 and 800,000 undocumented orphan wells, with over 120,000 already identified as uncapped. Addressing this problem is critical, but the cost, ranging from tens of thousands to millions of dollars per well, is increasingly falling on taxpayers. The root of this issue lies in systemic regulatory failures and cost-shifting practices within the oil and gas industry. Older wells are often sold to smaller operators who lack the resources to maintain or cap them. When these operators go bankrupt, liabilities are abandoned. Bonding requirements meant to ensure cleanup funds are woefully inadequate, typically covering less than 2% of the actual cost. To tackle this crisis, I propose an environmental liability tax, or ELT, on oil and gas extraction. Levied per barrel, this tax would ensure that cleanup costs are collected upfront, placing the financial responsibility on the companies benefiting economically from the wells. Funds from the ELT could be held in state or federal trusts dedicated to plugging orphaned wells and restoring lands. The ELT could also incentivize better practices by offering tax credits to companies proactively addressing environmental risks. By taxing extraction rather than chasing bankrupt operators, the ELT would create a sustainable, enforceable funding mechanism to address this growing environmental liability. As the U.S. approaches peak oil, the time for systemic reform is now, before the cleanup bill comes due with no one left to pay. Thanks so much for listening to Minimum Competence, your daily news podcast for lawyers. If you're looking for more than minimum competence, links to further reading on all the topics touched on today are in the show notes. And reviews go a long way towards helping new listeners to find our show. If you have a moment and can leave a rating or review on your podcast player, we'd sure appreciate it. And if you know someone that might be interested in a story we cover, consider sending them the episode. But remember, nothing here should be construed as legal advice because it is certainly not that. Minimum Competence is available at minimumcomp.com and wherever it is you get your finely crafted podcasts. If you haven't checked out the website in a while, give it a look. There are complete transcripts and resources for each episode and its corresponding segments, as well as an opportunity to receive new episodes in email, newsletter, form. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and until then, remember, well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.